10. Unforgettable Ace Frehley moments. The final footage. The stage lights dim. Smoke curls around the edges of a vast, empty arena, leaving the giant black and white face of a spaceman painted across the backdrop. Somewhere backstage, the echo of guitars tuning bounces off steel beams. A solitary figure sits alone, a guitar in hand, mask half on, half off, staring at the floor as if the weight of decades rests on his shoulders. This is Ace Frehley, the man behind the mask, the guitarist whose riffs have carved themselves into the hearts of millions. The roar of the crowd is still a memory, but it hangs in the air like a ghost. He smiles faintly, a grin that has seen both chaos and triumph. Humor, that unyielding, unshakable humor, has been his lifeline through the whirlwind of fame, the chaos of touring, and the dizzying heights and depths of the rock and roll life. Some call him Ace, the space-bound rebel. Others see him as the man who always got the girl, always got the thrill. From a whirlwind day, traveling across 3 countries in 24 hours, to the infamous DeLorean chase that would become the stuff of legend, Ace's life reads like a fever dream. Wild encounters, unpredictable twists, and moments of surreal humor, these are the threads that stitch together a career and a life that defy expectation. Behind the makeup and the pyrotechnics, there's a man who has navigated fame, fortune, and chaos with laughter as his compass. In this journey, we don't just see Ace the guitarist or Ace the celebrity. We glimpse Ace the human, a man balancing absurdity and artistry, danger and delight, memory and myth. Before the roar of the crowd, before the makeup and the flying guitars, there was a boy in a quiet suburb, eyes wide with wonder, dreaming of music and escape. Paul Daniel. Ace Frehley wasn't born into the spotlight. He carved a path toward it with calloused fingers, endless nights of practice, and a mind buzzing with imagination. Growing up in New York, the city's chaos mingled with suburban normalcy, shaping a young man who was both grounded and restless. He found solace in music early, sneaking into dimly lit record stores, pressing the needle against vinyls, and absorbing every note, every chord, every story. Music became his escape and his identity. Hours in his bedroom were spent with guitar in hand, not just learning songs, but inventing sounds, shaping his own voice through strings and frets. He wasn't chasing fame yet, he was chasing expression, the kind of pure, unfiltered joy that only music can provide. His early influences were diverse, spanning rock and roll pioneers, blues legends, and the burgeoning sounds of the 1,970 seconds. Every note he played seemed to hum with a hunger for freedom, for movement, for a world beyond the ordinary. By the time Kiss was forming, Ace had already become a figure of quiet intrigue in local music circles. He had an aura, part rebel, part comedian, part virtuoso, that made people sit up and take notice. And yet, there was a duality in him. Behind the humor and charm lay a vulnerability, a sensitivity that most fans would never see beneath the mask. He was, in many ways, a paradox. Brash, yet introspective. Chaotic, yet disciplined. Larger than life, yet deeply human. After days of painstaking investigation, a breakthrough finally emerged. Subtle at first, like the flicker of dawn across a darkened city. The detectives had collected witness statements, reviewed traffic patterns, and meticulously examined every detail of Ace Frehley's chaotic chase through the streets. But it was in the synthesis of these fragmented details that clarity began to crystallize the moment when the story shifted from speculation and confusion to something tangible, something real. It started with the meticulous review of police radio logs and traffic camera footage. On paper, the pursuit had seemed erratic, almost nonsensical. But, as investigators compared the timestamps with the visual evidence, a pattern emerged. A sequence of calculated, though risky maneuvers that revealed more than just recklessness. Each turn, acceleration, and sudden stop told a story of instinct, panic, and the human mind under pressure. For the detectives, it was a revelation, The chaos of the chase was actually a trail of breadcrumbs, each leading closer to understanding the driver's state of mind. The next breakthrough came when investigators spoke with Ace's partner, who had been called during the live radio interview. Her recollections were vivid, offering context that no footage could provide. She described Ace's mindset, the adrenaline, the fear, the humor, as a shield against the reality of his actions. This insight was invaluable. It gave investigators a psychological map showing why he had made the choices he did, why he had momentarily escaped the officers, and why he had eventually stopped. The puzzle pieces were starting to fit together. Physical evidence corroborated these accounts. The DeLorean's damage, the skid marks on asphalt, and even minor dents in the surrounding environment aligned perfectly with the narratives being collected. Each piece of material evidence reinforced the human accounts, turning anecdote into fact. For detectives, it was an almost cinematic moment, the disparate threads of witness testimony, surveillance footage, and forensic detail, all converging to reveal the truth hidden in plain sight. But the emotional breakthrough was just as significant. Ace himself, when approached by authorities, offered a candid perspective. Unlike the initial denials or jokes, there was an unguarded moment of recognition, acknowledgement of fear, of error, and of consequence. He recounted how panic had taken over during the chase, how instinct had driven every sharp turn and sudden acceleration. In that reflection, investigators saw the duality of the incident, both a legal violation and a profoundly human experience of fear and impulsivity. For the detectives, connecting these dots wasn't just about solving a case. It was about validating every painstaking step they had taken. They had followed leads, sifted through conflicting stories, and analyzed physical evidence with relentless attention to detail. Now, everything converged. The investigation transformed from a reactive process to a clear, forward-moving narrative. What had seemed like chaos was, in fact, a story waiting to be fully understood. The breakthrough also highlighted a subtle truth about celebrity and accountability. Ace's fame had amplified every misstep, making the stakes higher and the scrutiny more intense. But it also underscored a universal reality. Impulsive human behavior, regardless of status, leaves traces. These traces, in evidence, in witness accounts, in human emotion, formed a roadmap that could guide investigators to clarity and eventually justice. It was a lesson in patience, observation, and the quiet power of meticulous detective work. Within the community, the breakthrough rippled like the first crack of light before dawn. Local residents who had followed the story began to see it in a new light, not just as a sensational chase involving a rock star, but as a narrative of consequence, accountability, and human fallibility. Police officers who had been under intense pressure to resolve the incident found renewed confidence in their methods. Every piece of evidence now had context. Every account had meaning. The investigation was no longer a blur of conflicting impressions, it was a story coming into focus. For Ace's friends, bandmates, and management, the breakthrough brought relief, tempered by reflection. They could now understand the full sequence of events, see how the situation had escalated, and appreciate the thoroughness with which law enforcement had worked. Humor and personality remained, but beneath it lay a sober awareness of what had transpired and why it mattered. The narrative of chaos began to shift toward comprehension, giving space for accountability, empathy, and ultimately, resolution. In the cinematic arc of the story, the breakthrough was the turning point, the moment where tension gave way to revelation. It was not a triumph in the traditional sense, but a quiet victory of clarity over confusion, understanding over speculation. The chase, the fear, and the adrenaline had all left their marks, but now these marks could be interpreted, pieced together, and told with accuracy, dignity, and insight. As investigators prepared for the next phase, the arrest and eventual confession, the breakthrough laid the foundation. It provided the framework for truth, the evidence to support justice, and the psychological insight to navigate the human dimensions of the case. For everyone involved, It was a reminder that even in the midst of chaos, careful observation, patience, and empathy could illuminate the path forward. The stage was set. What had once been a blurred, frantic sequence of events was now a coherent story. And with this clarity, the investigation could move toward resolution, holding both the law and human understanding in delicate balance. The breakthrough wasn't just about uncovering facts, it was about connecting the heart of the human story with the rigor of legal and investigative process. In the days and weeks following Ace Frehley's arrest and confession, the ripples of the DeLorean chase extended far beyond the immediate incident. For fans, bandmates, and the wider community, the story shifted from adrenaline-fueled spectacle to a quiet, contemplative reckoning with the human side of celebrity life, and with the consequences that even the most audacious figures cannot escape. What had once been a tale of reckless speed and humor now demanded reflection, empathy, and understanding. The first and most profound impact was on Ace himself. For someone who had spent decades living life in high-octane bursts on stage, in studio sessions, and traveling between countries at a pace most could barely imagine, the aftermath forced a confrontation with reality. Humor, which had long been his shield, could no longer entirely obscure the weight of responsibility. In quiet moments, away from cameras and spotlights, he faced the knowledge that impulsive choices carried consequences, not only for himself but for those around him, fans, bystanders, and law enforcement alike. There was a soberness to these reflections, a pause in the rock and roll whirlwind that rarely allowed such moments. Among the fans, the story evolved into a kind of mythos. The DeLorean chase became legendary, told repeatedly in interviews, podcasts, and casual conversations, but always with a layered understanding of its real-life implications. People laughed at the chaos, admired Ace's candor, and recognized the sobering lessons that had emerged. The narrative had transformed. It was no longer just a story of speed and panic, but of accountability, human fallibility, and the way humor can coexist with serious consequences. Families and close friends of Ace were left to navigate a complex mix of pride, concern, and empathy. Pride, because he had confronted the consequences directly and with honesty. Concern, because the events had placed him in danger and potentially endangered others. And empathy, because they understood the pressures, impulses, and humanity behind his actions. In personal conversations, they recounted stories of his generosity, humor, and resilience, framing the DeLorean incident as a vivid, if cautionary, chapter in a life defined by creativity and audacity. Psychologically, the aftermath also offered moments of subtle healing. For Ace, this was a period of introspection, where he could reconcile the thrill of past adventures with the responsibility of adulthood. For the broader community, it was an opportunity to reflect on the complexity of human behavior, the unpredictability of decisions made in the heat of the moment, and the grace of confronting one's own mistakes. The laughter that had always punctuated his life remained, but it was now accompanied by a tempered wisdom, a deeper understanding of cause and effect. Even the DeLorean itself, once a symbol of rebellion and speed, became a marker of narrative and reflection. Fans would joke about the incident, but there was an unspoken acknowledgement that the car represented more than escapades. It was a reminder of risk, consequence, and the fragility of life. The story lived on in interviews, podcasts, and documentaries, each retelling offering new insight into the human side of fame, the delicate balance between impulsivity and foresight, and the enduring impact of choices made in seconds. Ultimately, the aftermath was a study in human complexity. Ace Frehley emerged not only as a legendary musician, but also as a person who had faced the full consequences of a chaotic chapter in his life with honesty, reflection, and resilience. Fans, colleagues, and investigators alike were reminded that behind the laughter, wild stories, and rock and roll bravado exists a person shaped by choices, instincts, and emotions, someone capable of recklessness, insight, humor, and growth. The DeLorean incident became more than a story of speed. It became a story of human consequence, empathy, and the power of reflection. In this space between chaos and clarity, the narrative naturally transitions toward the deeper reflections of the story, the lessons, the humanity, and the enduring significance that resonates beyond the headlines. The stage is set for final contemplation, honoring memory, and understanding what it all truly means. The story also highlights the remarkable role of empathy in storytelling. By understanding Ace's motivations, his humor, and his perspective, we are invited to see beyond the spectacle. We witness the tension between recklessness and responsibility, chaos and consequence, impulsivity and reflection. And in that space, we recognize the emotional weight carried by everyone involved, from law enforcement officers balancing safety with respect, to fans and friends navigating concern and admiration, to Ace himself reconciling action with accountability. The story becomes cinematic not because of danger or drama alone, but because of its emotional depth and human resonance. It is precisely this kind of storytelling that defines the final footage. Here, we explore the moments behind the headlines, the choices behind the chaos, and the humanity behind the mythos. True crime, true stories, and real-life drama are not just about action. They are about understanding, empathy, and reflection. In Ace Frehley's story, we see the interplay of humor, fame, risk, and responsibility. We see how a single, high-stakes incident can illuminate the complexities of human behavior and the power of personal growth. It is a story that lingers long after the chase ends, teaching lessons in accountability, resilience, and self-awareness. For our viewers, there is also a personal takeaway. Life, like the roads Ace navigated that night, can be unpredictable. We are all capable of impulsive decisions, moments of recklessness, or choices that surprise even ourselves. And yet, in each of us lies the capacity for reflection, humor, and recovery to learn from our mistakes, reconcile with consequences, and continue moving forward. Ace's story is a reminder that even in chaos, there can be insight, and even in missteps, there can be humanity. At the final footage, we honor these stories with the care they deserve. Every tale we share, whether a chilling crime, a mysterious disappearance, or the wild, chaotic life of a rock and roll icon, is presented with empathy, cinematic storytelling, and a focus on the human experience. We explore the choices, the consequences, and the emotional resonance that make each story unforgettable. And through these stories, we invite our audience to reflect, understand, and connect with the lives behind the headlines. So, as you finish watching Ace Frehley's remarkable story, we encourage you to pause and reflect on its lessons. Consider the balance of humor and responsibility, chaos and consequence, fame and humanity. Think about the people in your life, the choices you make, and the stories waiting to be told. Stories that are thrilling, emotional, and profoundly human. And if this journey through adrenaline, reflection, and insight has resonated with you, we invite you to join our growing community. Subscribe to The Final Footage for more cinematic explorations of real stories. Stories that captivate, educate, and move you. Hit the notification bell to ensure you never miss a tale that blends mystery, psychology, and human emotion. Explore our archives for deep dives into legendary figures, chilling true crime cases, and unforgettable human experiences. And most importantly, take these stories with you, reflect on them, learn from them, and honor the lives and lessons they reveal. Because at the end of the day, every story we tell, whether about a wild rock and roll chase, a decades-old mystery, or an unsolved case, is ultimately about humanity. It is about the people, the emotions, and the choices that define us. It is about understanding, empathy, and connection. And it is about remembering that even the most chaotic nights, the wildest adventures, and the most dramatic moments can hold lessons that last a lifetime. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Stay curious, stay empathetic, and keep exploring the stories that shape our world, one unforgettable piece of the final footage at a time.